All right, guys, we're at Dover this weekend. This is one of my favorite racetracks on the schedule. From a fantasy NASCAR perspective, I've always done very well here. I've had some of my biggest days in DraftKings at Dover. And I think part of that is because this is a relatively predictable racetrack. We don't see many wrecks despite it being a 1 mile concrete oval. Um, More so mechanical issues, which aren't predictable and um, could be are just as race altering as wrecks, but we don't see. It's not like we see a ton of mechanical issues. Don't see a ton of wrecks. It's not saying there can't be any, but we just don't see them. Typically there's one or two big name drivers finishing in the 30s, but for the most part, it's your typical bottom feeders down there. So let's take a look at the lap dominators for the last 5 races here at Dover. In May of earlier this year, we had Kevin Harvick, who started second and led little over half the race, 201 of the 400 laps, while Brad Keselowski led 108 after starting eighth. On this chart here, I'm sure you know by now, but the number in parentheses is where the driver started. Fall race last year, Chase Elliott started 12th, led 138 of the 400 laps. Kyle Larson started third, led 137. Kyle Larson led the most laps in the spring of 2017 after starting fifth, led 241, while Martin Truex Jr. led 102 after starting second. Truex led 187 of the 400 laps in the fall 2016 race after starting second. We actually had 3 dominators that race. Kyle Busch led 102 laps after starting third, while Jimmy Johnson led 90 after starting eighth. And then in the spring of 2016, Kevin Harvick from the pole led 117 of the 400 laps. Kyle Larson came in second with 85 laps led after starting 23rd. So as we can tell here, the 2 top dominators typically haven't came from the pole position. Over the last 4 races, that hasn't happened. We had to go back to 2016 with Kevin Harvick. And since 2011, the pole sitter has led the most laps at Dover twice. That's 2 times in 14 races. Looking at DraftKings scoring, the pole sitter has averaged 55.9 fantasy points since 2013. And as you can see from the chart here, Kevin Harvick in 2014 and 2016 are really the 2 outliers on that data set and that over that 9-race span. You take those 2 out and you're at 46.4 DraftKings points per race for the pole sitter at Dover. So that leads us into this week's pole sitter, Kyle Busch, who was awarded the pole based on owner points in the rule book since qualifying got rained out on Friday. Kyle at Dover, he's won here before. He knows how to race this track. But as far as this weekend's race and DraftKings goes, I am more on, I would rather have an extremely low percentage of ownership for Kyle Busch simply because I don't see him dominating here at Dover. With that being said, I could see Kyle Busch in victory lane on Sunday, but at the same time, winning a race, dominating a race, 2 completely different things. The problem with Kyle Busch this week is the guy starting second, Kevin Harvick, which we'll talk about here in a second. As far as Kyle Busch goes this weekend, though, like I said, he didn't earn the pole. And even if he did, looking at those trends of previous races, it's hard to pick the pole sitter here at Dover without him having a great car. And everything that we've seen from Kyle Busch this weekend points to him not having a great car. He probably has a very good car, but he was 19th fastest in the first practice session there on Friday, and then he did end up 9th fastest on Saturday. Didn't blow anybody out of the water as far as average speed or anything. His 15-lap average was way down there, 19th best, last on the chart. Didn't show up in the overall average speed. Obviously, I don't think Kyle Busch is going to be a 20th place car, but with place differential being so important in DraftKings, I see myself having maybe 5%, maybe 10%, extremely low exposure of Kyle Busch, the pole sitter, in today's race. As I mentioned before, Kevin Harvick is starting second. The thing about Harvick this weekend is he was almost his speed almost went under the radar in a way because Kyle Larson was so fast. But at the same time, if you watched practice on Saturday, Larson said that Harvick's car was better than his, despite the 42 being the best on the 5 lap, 10 lap, 15 lap average chart, had the fastest lap, and he was up there in overall average speed as well. So for Larson to say that is significant because he tends to be one of the most honest drivers in the garage. He's going to tell you like it is. And another thing to note there with speed, Harvick he had the 4th best 10 lap average there in final practice. He was in, he was 10th fastest overall. Fastest lap was in the middle of that session, but he had the best overall average speed. Now, I know some people don't value overall average speed, but that has always been one of my favorite statistics to analyze. Maybe people that don't value it don't know how to read it, but Harvick did have the overall average speed in Saturday's only practice session, and he's looking like he's my number 1 rated dominator for Sunday's race. Over the last 5 races here at Dover, he has the most average fastest laps per race at 50, and he dominated here in May, leading just over half the laps and winning from the pole. The only concern I have about Harvick is his pit crew, because pit road is very important here at Dover. One mistake on pit road during green flag pit stop, you're 2 or 3 laps down very easily. So, and we've seen Harvick's pit crew screw him in the past. So, one thing to keep in mind, but at the same time, Harvick is definitely one of the best plays here on Sunday. Martin Truex Jr. starting 3rd. He consistently puts up fastest laps here at Dover, so I can't say, fade him completely. The thing is, the fastest laps wise, as I said, Harvick over the last 5 races has the most fastest laps per race. Truex is right there with him with 49 per race. My issue with Truex is that he hasn't been his normal super fast self. The thing with the 78 team is typically they don't deviate from their initial setup as soon as they unload at the track. So when Truex is only 12th fastest in the opening practice session, and then 19th fastest in Saturday's race run practice session, that concerns me a little bit. With that being said, we're still talking about one of the best drivers here at Dover. From DraftKings perspective and building lineups, it's hard for me to see Harvick and Truex being the building blocks of the best lineup. I think it's going to be either or there. If Harvick runs into issues early, Truex is the most likely guy to take over and dominate. Maybe pairing Truex with Larson and then going from there could be a good strategy. I'd give you a $600 savings from Harvick, but I just don't see Harvick and Truex in the same lineup being the best lineup here today. Truex is definitely a contender for the win, definitely a contender for dominator points. I'd rank him 3rd as far as dominator potential heading into Sunday's race. Brad Keselowski starts 4th. He's actually priced pretty well this week at $10,700, and I like him as far as finish wise. But when you're priced at nearly $11,000, you need to dominate the race, especially starting 4th as well. Keselowski has a good car. He was 6th in 15 lap average there on Saturday, 5th in overall average speed. But does he have a better car than Harvick? Does he have a better car than Truex? Does he have a better car than Larson? It's hard to see Keselowski outracing those guys. I could see him running 3rd through 5th all day, but I don't see him up there leading laps, and I don't see him up there getting fastest laps either. Maybe if you want to do some lineups where you use Keselowski as a pivot off of Larson. He's $500 more expensive, but that's about the only way I can see getting Keselowski into some lineups for DraftKings. He's pretty good here at Dover, not great, and I just don't see me having a large amount of Keselowski exposure, except in those lineups where I want to be different. Clint Bowyer starts 5th this weekend. I think he's a great pick. His car was so good in Saturday's practice session that he quit 10 minutes early. A lot of people make note of that, and I think because of that, he has the potential to go over-owned here on Sunday. The high starting spot, starting in the top 5, will definitely help deter some people, but $9,300 is affordable. Not to mention he led 40 laps here in the spring. If he's got even a somewhat similar car there, he also finished 2nd there. He's going to have a great race here on Sunday. Like I said, my only concern with Bowyer is him being very highly owned. I'll be the first to admit I'm not the greatest when it comes to trying to project ownership percentage, so I'm not going to try to do that. But if you have the hunch of, Bowyer going 30 or more % owned on Sunday, I'd almost lean to being underweight on him, just to play that the percentages there of being different. Joey Logano starts 6th. As far as DraftKings goes, I think he starts too high, and he's not going to dominate. He has 4 career laps led here at Dover, and he also only has 1 finish better than 10th in the last 7 races here. He's got a good starting spot. Will obviously have a pretty good pit stall, but from a DraftKings perspective, just don't see Logano being very good this weekend. He's priced pretty well there at $8,900, but I'm going to stay away from Logano. I may have a few lineups with him, but nothing too major. Kurt Busch is starting 7th, and I actually like him as a pivot off of Bowyer. If you get the hunch that Bowyer's going to be highly owned, I think Kurt Busch could be a good replacement for him. He does have 30 fastest laps total in the last 4 Dover races. He starts a little bit further back than Bowyer there in 7th. Bowyer starts 5th. And Kurt, his history here at the Monster Mile, he's won before. That was back in 2011. But he hasn't done very well here as of late. Since 2012, he has just 2 single-digit finishes. Now, the good news is that one of those came here in the spring when he finished 5th, and Stewart-Haas Racing has been the best on these shorter tracks all season long. So to kind of judge Kurt based off of his history there, I don't think is a very good move, simply because those cars have been so good this year. Practice-wise, Kurt was 6th fastest there in Saturday's session. He also had the 8th best 10-lap average and was 6th best in overall average speed. Let's find his 15-lap average. He was 8th best in 15-lap average as well. So he was somewhat similar speed-wise to Clint Bowyer. And like I said, I like him as a pivot off of him. I actually like the other Stewart-Haas car of Eric Almirola even more so as a pivot off of Bowyer and Kurt Busch. So we'll talk about him a little bit later. Ryan Blaney starts 8th this weekend. Overall, in the fantasy NASCAR world, I think he's a nice sleeper pick, but I don't see him having any dominator potential here from DraftKings perspective. And he starts 8th, so it's going to take a top 5 run for him to really be a good pick. And his track history here, Blaney finished 8th this May in his first Penske start at Dover, which is his career best finish here. I'd consider Blaney a sleeper this weekend, but I'm not going to go too crazy as far as DraftKings goes. He's affordable there at 8,500, but like I said, unless Blaney finishes top 5, just don't see that working out. Speed wise, he didn't blow anybody off the water out of the water there in Saturday's practice. He was 21st in 10 lap average, and didn't make the overall average speed chart, and 13th best in 15 lap average. So just don't see Blaney being a great pick. One thing to note, though, he did say that if they would have got qualifying in on Friday, that he thinks that the number 12 Ford would have qualified better than 8th. So if he's confident in the car, that team's coming off that great win at the Roval, maybe they surprise people here on Sunday. Like I said, he's a sleeper pick. Track history isn't great, but there's some potential there. These next few starting spots are where things really get interesting. We got some great cars lining up here, 9th, 10th, and 11th. First off, we got Chase Elliott there starting 9th. I like Chase Elliott at Dover. He actually has the best average finish here of 5th over 5 starts. Best of anyone in the garage. My only concern with Elliott and his price point this week, he's at 9,900 on DraftKings, is whether or not he can get up there and lead. What we really need to see out of Chase on Sunday is a repeat of last fall where he led 138 laps and had 47 fastest laps. This weekend, though, I'm just not seeing that kind of speed out of the 9 car. With that being said, he was 4th off the truck in that first practice session on Friday, and 4th fastest, and he was 5th fastest in Saturday's practice session, 9th and 10 lap average. And from a 15 lap average perspective, he did not make that long of a run. Okay. So from that standpoint and Chase's history here at Dover, I love being overweight on him in DraftKings today. He's priced right under Larson, so you could almost see him as a pivot off of Larson, but at the same time, you could pair the two together and hope, Harvick. We know Harvick's going to probably dominate quite a bit in the early stages of this race, but hope he falls back to 10th and those negative place differential points cancel out, because it's going to be very difficult to, almost impossible to put any decent lineup together with Harvick, Larson, and Elliott. But I do think Chase has top 5 potential. That 9 team's running really well as of late, as is Hendrick as a whole. Hendrick has looked fast this weekend again. I really like Chase there. It's just hard to take him over Larson and be confident about it. So I like Chase. Not sure how it's going to work out as far as lineup construction with Larson being such a good pick. So let's talk about that 42 car now. As I mentioned before, Larson was the fastest car. Even in the Friday session, he was almost a tenth and a half faster than Harvick, who was second fastest. And then in Saturday's race runs practice session, he was 2.5 tenths faster than second place Denny Hamlin. Average speed wise, 10 lap average, he was almost a half mile an hour faster than Clint Boyer. Larson had the 4th best overall average speed. But he also ran the most laps. So taking that into account, he could have probably been ranked second to Harvick on that chart. Harvick ran 77 laps in that session. Larson best in 15 lap average. So now you got a guy starting 10th, priced pretty well at 10,200, who's very good here at Dover. The last 3 Dover races, he has the second most fastest laps with 139 and the most laps led with 378. So you got place differential plus dominator, chalk play. That's what it is this week. Larson's a great play in cash games. He's also a great play in GPPs, I think. You could go underweight on him, but it's probably not going to work out. Larson, like I said, Larson is great here at Dover. That team desperately needs a win this season, and this is definitely their best chance to do it. Looking at the May race, Larson started on the pole this year, the May race of this year. He did have a green flag pit stop penalty, and that kept him a couple laps down all day. He rebounded to finish 10th, but still wasn't the typical Larson performance that we've come to know out of him here at Dover. So from a DraftKings perspective, I think Larson is a must play this weekend. Now, whether you pair him with Harvick starting second, Truex starting third, throw in a Boyer in there, or Kurt Busch, maybe Chase Elliott. I think the main building block for your lineups needs to be Kyle Larson, and I think he's going to be very highly owned. We may even see him top 55%, maybe a little bit higher. Like I said, I'm not good at predicting ownership percentages, but I think a ton of people are going to be on Larson, and it's for a good reason. I actually like being even overweight on Larson. I don't have it set in stone yet, but I'm thinking that I'm going to have maybe 70% Larson, maybe 75, and hope for the best and hope that his car's as good as it looked, because it looks like the car to beat heading into Sunday, even though he doesn't want to admit that. He said he's close to Harvick on speed, but not quite there. So from a Kyle Larson viewpoint, Harvick fastest, hit Larson second fastest. Definitely a great play in DraftKings. Eric Almirola is starting 11th. I love being overweight on Almirola, whether you want to pivot off of Boyer, which would be a full $1,000 difference there, $1,000 savings, as Almirola's at 8,300 with Boyer at 9,300, or off of Kurt Busch, got an $800 savings there, or even off of Jimmy Johnson, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. The thing about Almirola is he's been good here at Dover in the past with Richard Petty Motorsports. He had a couple of fifth place finishes, and as I said, Stuart Haas on the shorter tracks this year has just been great. Also, in Saturday's practice session, Almirola was fourth fastest overall in the overall speed chart. Ended up 13th in 10-lap average, but he made that run late in the session, and he was the best of those drivers that made their runs late in the session. So that tells me he should have a better car than that. Overall average speed-wise, Almirola was third best, right there behind Harvick, Boyer. So we got three Stuart Haas cars and with the top three overall average speeds in Saturday's practice session. 15-lap average, Almirola was fifth best. He finished, I think, 11th here in May. Let me pull it up real quick. Yeah, he started 13th and finished 11th in May. I see Almirola having a better race this weekend. Starts 11th this time. As I said, I honestly wouldn't surprise me to see the 10 car up there in the top 5 when the checkered flag waves today. So from looking at Almirola, DraftKings wise, love being overweight on him at that 8,300 price point. There's a lot of good value in that price range, and I think Almirola has the potential to go under owned here today. He's starting, right there behind Larson, but still in that area where unless you have a great car, it's not really obvious that you're going to get place differential points. So Almirola, love being overweight on him. Alex Bowman, he's worth a shot. He starts 12th. That 88 car seems to surprise me quite a few times. Bowman's record here at Dover isn't great. It's his best finish is 20th. He finished 23rd here in May. Led 26 laps, though. I'm not sure how he did that. It might have been a pit strategy play. But he's a decent if you want to make a few lineups with him in it, he's worth a shot, on a few flyer rosters, I'd call him. On the shorter tracks this year, Bowman, he has a finish of 5th at Bristol, finished 11th at New Hampshire, and 8th in the second Bristol race. So with how Hendrick's running right now, it might be worth having a bit of exposure to Bowman, but hard to justify that price point when you have Kenseth, who starts 28th and is great at Dover at 7,100. So hard to justify putting Bowman in there unless Kenseth has issues. Jimmy Johnson is starting 13th. He is severely underpriced in DraftKings this weekend. He's an 11-time winner at Dover, and he's priced at $8,200. So I don't like that from the perspective of he's going to be on a high percentage of lineups. But at the same time, you can't really beat that value. We saw last week that Jimmy can get to the front and win a race. I think the Hendrick cars and Chevy as a whole have almost caught up to Toyota and Ford. So when you got a track like Dover that the driver talent can definitely benefit the team on race day, and you got a guy like Jimmy Johnson who's like I said, won here 11 times, has a average finish of 9.1 over 33 total starts, and he finished 9th here in May back when Hendrick was struggling. He's one of my favorite plays in DraftKings. My only concern is, like I said, if he goes over-owned and he ends up being that chalk play. But like I said, I'm not great at projecting ownership percentages. I will have plenty of Johnson today. And one last thing about that 48 team, Johnson ran, I think, 95 laps in Saturday's practice session, which that only happens, that's tied for the most by any driver in that session. That only happens when Jimmy really likes his car. And typically, unless he has some kind of issue during the race, his car is as good as advertised. So Johnson was 4th in 15 lap average in that Saturday's practice session and ended up 9th on the overall average speed. Also ran the most laps of anybody else on that overall average speed chart. So I don't know if Johnson's going to win the race, but I could definitely see him finishing top 5, which would obviously put him in the best lineup this weekend. Definitely like Johnson in DraftKings at Dover. Starting 14th today, we have the Golden Boy, Austin Dillon. Don't really like him in DraftKings. Don't plan on having much, if any, exposure for of Dillon on Sunday. He has an average finish of 22.3 here at Dover. Only 2 finishes better than 15th and 10 starts. And he just didn't show a bunch of speed in either practice session. So fully on board with totally fading Austin Dillon here on Sunday. Starts a little too high. Priced decently at $6,900. But still, I don't plan on having much, if any, of Austin Dillon. Denny Hamlin starts 15th. The week that I say not to pick Hamlin based on place differential is going to be the week that he goes and wins the race. So I don't like Hamlin at his price point. DraftKings did finally bump him down into those mid 9,000s. He's priced at 9,600 this weekend. My issue with him, one of my issues with him, he has 1 top 5 at Dover since 2010. However, he does have 4 top 10s in the last 5 Dover races. With that being said, this season, specifically 2018, he has 1 top 5 since Charlotte at the end of May. It's an extremely long time for a driver of his caliber and a car of that caliber to go without top 5 finishes. This weekend, I think he has top 10 potential, but because of his price point, I think the only way it really works out in the optimal lineup is if there's one sole dominator. If Harvick goes and leads 250, 275 laps and, puts down 100 fastest laps, then obviously the rest of your lineup is going to need to get the place differential and finish points, in which I could see Hamlin being a part of. I just don't really trust Hamlin that much, and his speed-wise, then he was second fastest there in Saturday's session, 5th on the 10-lap average chart. Didn't make it onto the top 10 in overall average speed, and also didn't make it on the 15-lap average. So that tells me that I don't know why they didn't make a longer run. since they were so fast over 10 laps. But I'll have some Hamlin exposure depending on how my lineups work out. You know, just throwing things around earlier, you can definitely fit a couple of those mid $9,000 guys into your lineup if you stay away from Harvick or Truex or Kyle Busch. Whether that's going to end up being the right play, we'll find out. So that's what I have to say about Hamlin. I know it's a little muddy and not clear, but just that's how it is. Eric Jones starts 16th. I like being overweight on Eric Jones. Like I said last week, I'm a Eric Jones fan from a fantasy NASCAR perspective, and the reason I like being overweight on Eric Jones is because he has an average finish of 15th here at Dover in 3 Cup Series starts, but that 20 did look pretty solid in practice on Saturday. You know, Jones had the 3rd best lap in that session, also ranked 7th in 10-lap average, 2nd in 15-lap average, and 8th in overall average speed. My hesitation with going, be super overweight on Jones this weekend is we saw a similar thing. We saw similar speed out of him in the spring this year. He started 11th and finished 18th in that race. So it's almost like, show me that you can finish and do well here at Dover before I really pick you. Like I said, I do like being overweight on Jones. He has that place differential potential starting 16th, and he's priced there at $8,700, so he's affordable. Ryan Newman starts 17th a row behind Jones. I think there's better value in that price range. The higher 7,800, you got Daniel Suarez sitting there at 8,000. Jamie McMurray at 7,500, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Newman has 2 top 10s in the last 9 Dover races. I see him finishing in the mid-teens. So starting 17th and finishing in the mid-teens probably isn't going to get him in the optimal lineup, and definitely not at that $7,800 price point. Paul Menard starts 18th. He is priced right there below Newman at $7,700. He hasn't really been good here at Dover since 2016, though, and there's nothing that shows speed-wise that he's going to be good this weekend. Obviously, Menard and that 21 team do surprise us quite a bit. But at the same time, I couldn't recommend being super heavy on Menard this weekend at that price. Daniel Suarez, I love the Daniel Suarez play this week. I do think because of how, Johnson is a good pick in that price range as well. Daniel Suarez is priced at $8,000 this week, below Johnson right there, who's at $8,200. The thing is, Daniel Suarez is great here at Dover. He's made 3 Cup Series starts. He's finished 3rd, 8th, and 6th. That doesn't happen by accident 3 times in a row. He's really good at this racetrack, but he's never started this far back in 19th. But the reason why I really like him from a DraftKings perspective today is not only his average finish here at Dover, but I think he has the potential to go under-owned to where he should be, just because that 19 Toyota didn't look great in the practices. He was 10th fastest in Friday's session, and then 24th fastest in Saturday's. 10-lap average-wise, he was 12th on that chart, though, and he also didn't make it onto the 15-lap average chart. But like I said, though, Dover is a very predictable track, so when you have a guy that consistently has finished in the top 8 in every single one of his starts, it's hard to say don't pick him, especially when he's starting 19th and, going from 19th into the top 10 at a price of $8,000. That's going to be great value on DraftKings. I plan on having a ton of rosters with Suarez today. I'm definitely going to be leaning heavily on him. 20th, though, this is where it gets interesting because I like the Jamie McMurray pivot off of Daniel Suarez as well. So he's at $7,500 in DraftKings this week. Um, Typically, the reason I like McMurray this week is he's finished ninth or better in 3 of the last 5 Dover races, and he also has, or not 3 of the last 5 Dover races, sorry. He's finished ninth or better in 3 of the last 5 races overall this season, including I think they finished second at the Roval last week when it was all said and done. McMurray also has 4 top 10s in the last 7 Dover races. And when Larson is fast, typically McMurray is too. So while the one car wasn't, top of the charts by any means in Saturday's session, he still was 15th fastest overall, and he ranked 22nd in 10-lap average, despite making that longer run later in the session. So I do like being overweight on McMurray, depending on what kind of strategy you want to take when it comes to Suarez and maybe even Kenseth. I like McMurray as the alternate play there at 7,500. He's kind of priced in between them. Kenseth at 7,100 and Suarez is at 8,000, as I said. So I definitely like McMurray depending on what kind of strategy you want to take. I don't think he has top 10 potential for Sunday's race, but maybe a 12th place finish or 13th place finish, I could definitely see Jamie Mack finishing there. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., I wrote him up in my article this week. I really love Stenhouse here this weekend. He looked good in practice. Third best 10-lap average there in Saturday's session. And he's when he stays out of trouble here at Dover, he finishes well. Finished 15th here in May of this year. And in 4 of the last 6 Dover races, Stenhouse has finished 15th or better. The only 2 exceptions were last year's 2 races where he finished 39th and 19th. So I do like Stenhouse this week. With him being priced so low at 6,000 though, and starting 21st and having that potential place differential, will he go over-owned? That's what I'm grappling with here before I set my final lineups for Sunday's race, and whether I want to play off of that and be underweight on Stenhouse, because I do think he's going to have significant ownership with how well he practiced. So, like we've seen all year, Stenhouse does have probably a higher chance of wrecking than any other driver, and I know I said that's not very common here at Dover, but at the same time, it could easily happen, in which staying away from Stenhouse could be a good play. So, do like Stenhouse. I will have a decent amount of exposure to him. Not quite sure yet where I'm going to stand against everybody else, which I guess you could say that about everybody. William Byron starts 22nd, priced there at 6,700, and it's kind of a weird price unless you pivot off of Kenseth, who starts back in 28th, so obviously has better place differential potential. And, Byron, he's burned me so many times this year in Fantasy NASCAR. It's hard to get excited about him when he doesn't, practice extremely well. But the Hendrick Motorsports cars do look good this weekend, so I wouldn't say Byron's a bad play. I'm probably going to be right there with the field as far as ownership percentage here on Sunday. So that's what I have to say about Byron. Chris Buescher is starting 23rd today. I think he has top 20 potential. I think he's worth exposure there as one of the lower price drivers, depending on, how the whole salary cap works out for you. Because he could definitely fit in there, if you had one of the extremely lower price guys like McDowell or Ty Dillon with you, and I could see Buescher working in there if you went with the Truex strategy as opposed to the Harvick strategy. As far as Dover goes, with Buescher, he's finished 23rd or better in 4 of his 5 Dover starts. He starts 23rd, so a little high, but at the same time, he tends to run well enough to stay out of trouble and come home with that top 20 finish, depending on what happens to others during the race. So I do think he can. I do think he can finish top 20 here this weekend. But saying that he's going to end up top 15 probably not going to happen. His teammate AJ Allmendinger starting 24th, right beside him. Thing about Allmendinger, I don't trust him from a fantasy NASCAR perspective. But basically for Dover this weekend, I have the same opinion on Allmendinger as I do on Buescher, except Allmendinger is a little more risky and higher price. So take that for what you will. Regan Smith is in the 95 again this weekend. I like Regan Smith as a DraftKings play. Starts 25th, has top 20 potential. In 3 of his 4 starts this year, he's finished top 20. And you're going to need that for it to work out and picking him priced at 6,200. One thing to note is that Casey Kane did run 17th here in the spring in this 95 car, so I do think there's potential for Regan Smith. As far as Buescher, who we just talked about, Smith is $100 cheaper. Still priced a little high at 6,200 without the guaranteed, top 20 finish. But at the same time, I do like Regan Smith this week. I think he fits into lineups well when you pair him with, someone like McDowell or Ty Dillon. Moving on, we got the front row guys of David Reagan and Michael McDowell starting 26th and 27th. They're also priced relatively similar. Reagan's at $5,500 for the Dover race, Dover 2. McDowell's at $5,600. Reagan overall has 3 top 20s in the last 6 races and no finish worse than 27th during that span. He did finish 21st in this race last year, but has finished 27th or 30th in 3 of the other over the last 4 here at Dover. With that being said, I do like how Front Row Motorsports is running right now. So I like being overweight on Reagan. He's very affordable this week. He could easily, pick up 5 or 6 place differential points. Like being overweight on him, but not super overweight. As far as McDowell goes, I love being overweight on McDowell this week. I think he's very affordable. He finished 22nd here back in May and has finished between 19th and 27th in the last 4 Dover races. And as far as momentum, similar to his teammate Reagan, McDowell has 3 top 20s in the last 5 races overall. So definitely could see McDowell in the optimal lineup this weekend, and like him and Reagan as a pivot off of Ty Dillon if you want to. We'll talk about him here in a little bit. Matt Kenseth starts 28th in this weekend's race. He's priced, it's kind of a weird price there at $7,100, but he's made 38 career starts here at Dover, so he definitely knows how to race this place. And even though he's in that 6 car, which doesn't show a ton of speed all the time, I think he's a great pick. Now, what kind of ownership percentage we'll see out of him? Hopefully that high price turns people away. Kenseth has finished top 20 in 6 of his 11 starts in that 6 car this year. So, if he can pull off just a 20th place finish, you're looking at positive 8 place differential there for Kenseth. Definitely going to be maybe not extremely worth it there. At 7,100, but a good play nonetheless if Kenseth can get up there into the teens, which I think he has the ability to do. Bubba Wallace is priced at $5,900 this week and starts 29th. Him and Ty Dillon are sitting there. Ty Dillon starts 30th and priced at $5,700. So I kind of consider both these guys somewhat similar. Bubba finished 25th at Dover here earlier this year, while Ty Dillon has never finished worse than 32nd here at Dover. He finished 24th in this year's first race at the Monster Mile and was 14th and 22nd last year. I'd say Ty Dillon is the chalk pick and safer than Bubba Wallace. And like I mentioned earlier, I think a good pivot off of Ty Dillon, if you'd like to, is McDowell or Reagan, or you could also pair those two together and be able to complete your lineup that way. Practice-wise, these guys weren't anything special, but at the same time, all they need to do is keep it off the wall, and they should be able to improve from their starting positions on Sunday. Now, looking at 31st through 40th, these are what I consider the bottom feeder guys. Got Matt DiBenedetto rolling off 31st on Sunday, priced at 5,300, which is pretty affordable. He's finished between 27th and 31st in the last 4 Dover races, so that's about where his ceiling is this weekend. If he fits into your lineup, he's pretty reliable, but I wouldn't intentionally go overweight on him. Ross Chastain starting 32nd, priced at 5,400. Last week, going super heavy on him at the Roval worked out for me very well. I was at 50%, maybe a little bit over. He's finished 20th or better in 5 of the last 6 races overall in the Cup Series, and he finished 28th here in May at Dover.